Right, so thanks everyone for coming on to our session, our webinar, talking about Dynamics 365 versus Power Platform. It's myself and Steve Mordue, a Microsoft MVP, and our special guest today. Thank you all for joining and for your interest in this discussion. What we're really trying to do here is, the objective is to talk about, obviously, Dynamics CRM very, very quickly through its past journey, then talk about what has happened recently over the past couple of years and what's happening over this year and next at a high level in terms of Dynamics 365, Power Platform. We're all hearing those kind of terms and Power Platform versus Dynamics, and you know, you can use this or that, and people start to get confused, including people who have been doing Dynamics for so long. Hence, we're doing this session to try to clarify some of these kind of confusion, which is very normal. I think many people are confused by it. What do you think it is confusing for many people as well?
Yeah, I think definitely, you know, a lot of the stuff Microsoft has done branding wise for a long time now has often confused customers as to what that means and what's up there. And you know, we're seeing the same thing with Power Platform.
Yeah.
Are you gonna share your screen?
Yeah, I thought I did. Yeah. Can you see my screen? Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah. So so without further ado, I'll just straight jump into our very quick introductions, just for folks who haven't kind of met me or met Steve before, or spoke to us, or heard about us. So I'm not going to take you through all of this. It's a very busy slide. But basically, I've been doing Microsoft CRM since version 1.2. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I'm Solutions Director for TechLabs London, which is the team behind iProperty Cloud Solution, which is an ISV solution focusing on the property and housing market. Our very special guest, Steve, he's the CEO of ForceWorks Rapid Start CRM. So Rapid Start CRM is a very I don't want to. Steve, you want to give a very kind of quick line or two about it, but I think it's a very successful ISV solution that allows you to you know, jumpstart your CRM sales, CRM and general CRM implementation. Is that fair?
Pretty good. Pretty good. I like it.
And Steve is also obviously a Microsoft MVP and a regular commentator about the state of the Dynamics nation that we go through. Right. So let me start by talking about the journey of Microsoft CRM. I appreciate many of you might already know this, but some of you might be new into the whole world of Microsoft Dynamics. Maybe you've been doing it for a few months, few years, but you haven't seen it from the beginning. So we had all these versions that you can see on the screen, from version 1, version 1.2, and that's where I got introduced into that Microsoft CRM about 13 years ago. And then we moved from there to version 3, version 4, and then we switched into years, so it became 2011, 2013, all the way until we are now in version 9. And I think very soon the whole idea of having a version will not really be relevant as such, because we're now focusing on a pure SaaS platform, as a software as a service platform. And what that means is there will always be updates. There are weekly updates, there are monthly updates, and there are two major updates every year, so twice a year updates. So the idea of having versions is really not going to be that relevant, if you like. But it has been a very long journey from the CRM system that you see there all the way to where we are now. But the one thing about Microsoft CRM, and I am obviously very biased, is that Microsoft CRM was built from scratch by Microsoft. It's built from the ground up by Microsoft. It has a very strong core backend. So it has a very good database design. It has a very good security layer, data layer, business layer, all wrapped around its backend. And obviously, it wasn't perfect from day one, but you know, any system that had such massive investment over the years, you know, will always get to the, you know, almost perfect condition that we are in. It, but I think it's a very powerful backend, and the proof of that is that I've actually met a lot of organizations back in 2010, 2009, 2011, who had CRM4 and CRM 2011 on-premise, and because they loved the data layer, they loved the APIs, what they did is they actually built custom applications on top of just the back end, and that grew to be called XRM. So instead of CRM, back end of Dynamics. So the interface that you look at, the screen here on the right-hand side, this is the interface. This is your presentation layer. But the back-end layer, the database, the security layer, the business layer, I've met organizations over the years, at least over the past 9-10 years, who built their own interface, completely custom interface, looking at the back-end Dynamics database and its XRM structure. And the idea here was we have a very powerful backend, and we're going to build our own interface to look exactly how we want it to look. And I'm mentioning this because this is relevant to our discussion as we go through the difference between the two. So now, as we stand today, we started from the basic customer service, sales, and marketing modules. So in CRM, Microsoft CRM, a few years ago, you can modules. Customer service, sales, and marketing. But that has changed dramatically over the past couple of years. So, for example, we have all these modules now: customer service, marketing, services, and project services. And these have become the core of Microsoft Dynamics 365 modules. But we also have seen a lot more change in the past 12 to 18 months, where we have more additional modules, or apps as we now call them, such as the sales artificial intelligence, which is Sales Insights, customer service artificial intelligence, marketing AI, mixed reality, remote assist, layout, product visualize, guides, and few more coming up in the next few months. So there is a lot that all of these are apps on top of Dynamics 365, or are Dynamics 365 what we call first-party apps. So, Steve, if I can, ask you here to kind of comment, but how do you feel the huge number of new apps that are coming? How do you see this? Do you see it in a positive way? Do you see this causing confusion to people? What's your view on that?
So I think both. I think it's very positive and it's very confusing for people, particularly those that have been using Dynamics up until now. The whole idea of apps is kind of new. I think the first thought of a lot of people when you say app, they're thinking, oh, it's some sort of, you mean like the mobile app that we have or things like that. And
exactly.
And really, thinking about these first party workloads like sales, customer service as being separate from the platform and now turned into apps themselves is part of what people are trying to wrap their arms around. It's interesting you mentioned that Dynamics 365 is built by Microsoft, and within Dynamics, I think the second product that they actually built themselves the ground up was marketing, which is very recent. So they built something a long time ago, and they didn't build anything themselves up until recently. And it's definitely a difference when you see the stuff that they built versus the stuff that they bought.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the fact that it is a native application that grew out natively out of Microsoft definitely gives it advantage in my opinion. With all respect to other Dynamics, ERP backend systems, as I call them, or ERP systems, I think the advantage here is that this as a Microsoft application that has to be built on Microsoft technology and has always been enhanced and upgraded to the latest Microsoft, which helped lots of people with .NET background like myself to move from .NET into Microsoft CRM. Right.
Yeah, they really leveled the playing field also for ISVs like yourself and some of the stuff that we're doing, because Dynamics for marketing, for example, is built using the same tools and capabilities that anybody else out there has available. So it's almost like an ISV solution that was built in-house.
Exactly. Yeah, and Microsoft uses it throughout its organization as well. So they know when things are not right, they can see it firsthand because they are using it internally for their sales. So I think it's it's a great product. It's our bread and butter, as we say. But hey, we're definitely both of us are not neutral in this, in this area. Right. So then a few years ago, the concept of Common Data Services, or CDS, came out, where which was never called 1.0, but let's call it 1.0. So CDS 1.0 came into the world, and what the idea was, which is a very good idea, that we need to have a centralized common platform where we have a common data model, a common data services that sit around this common data model. We have some entities that are common across all applications, and then we connect from this common data model or common data services platform with all other applications. So, for example, you had connectors to Dynamics CRM, you have connectors to Dynamics AX, or you can build connectors to any application you want. So, and that you can connect to cloud services, Microsoft Azure, intelligence. There were some development tools. There was also the concept of obviously PowerApps, where you can go and build a PowerApp. I don't know if anyone remembers, but I remember many years ago, the first ever name of PowerApps was Project Sienna. Do you remember that, Steve?
I do.
And I remember, I think it was Satya Nadella, who first came on stage once, and he said, "Look at this. This is Project Sienna, and it's available as a public preview, and you can build applications using functions such as like JavaScript functions." And I remember downloading it and trying to get it to connect to Dynamics CRM, and I failed miserably. But it was a very good experience because I built the app in 7 minutes, and I think I have a blog post until now that gets hits that's called "Build an App in 7 minutes." But yeah, so it kind of started as Project Sienna, which is a great idea to say, just like Excel, which is pretty much every single organization uses Excel that I've heard of, at least. So why don't we have something very similar to Excel, but it's just an apps, building apps, and instead of building up your spreadsheets, you build up apps using functions which are very familiar to many business people. And you don't have to have developers to build an Excel sheet for you with some formulas or pivot table or anything like this. The same thing with PowerApps. The idea is you don't have to have developers to build this for you. So how do we build that? Build it on the common data services and the common data model. However, it's fair to say, and I don't know if you think, I don't know if Microsoft would like me to say that, it's fair to say maybe the adoptions wasn't great or wasn't as expected for the CDS 1.0, the very original CDS. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I think that whenever Microsoft launches anything new like that, there are some of us, like those of us probably on this call that'll jump in and take a look. But most people have, I think, learned the lesson that let's wait. Let's just wait a little bit and see where this goes. I mean, you and I have a reason to get in early so we can understand things, but for a lot of customers and a lot of folks, they've learned to kind of wait. And CDS, that whole thing changed the entire platform from what it started.
Yes.
And for those that waited, they're actually in a better place than those that started earlier. So sometimes you don't want to jump immediately. You want to hang for the second swing at it.
Yeah, and I think it's very common now that people say always wait for version 2 of everything. Watches, devices, everything. Just wait for version 2. But
a lesson I've never learned. I'm always out there on the version 1 and find that a whole bunch of, and CDS was a good example. Lots of stuff that people learned, ended up not being used, and they had to learn something else. But it's fun for me. I kind of enjoy jumping in some of that new stuff.
The same thing. Yeah, and I do the same thing, especially with Microsoft technologies. We don't even go with version 1. You and I probably go on, the private preview and then the public preview and so on. But I think for the wider audience and also for larger enterprises, they probably wouldn't go into, to jump into production from the very first release unless they've had the kind of the support from a partner, from Microsoft product team at the beginning. So anyway, so CDS 1.0 then had some adoption, but maybe not the greatest. And Microsoft thought, I guess, in the background, and I'm guessing here, but we have this fantastic backend, which is a backend database called Microsoft Dynamics CRM that we call it XRM, which is the CRM database, which is very well-defined model application and database relationships and all the kind of the great entities that already exist. And on top of that, you have a very strong data layer, security layer. You've got your your views, your if anyone remembers from the on-premise days, the filtered views. You've got a business layer. You've got loads of functionality as well as the capabilities that sits behind this great back end that is called Microsoft Dynamics CRM, or the back end of Microsoft Dynamics CRM. Why don't we take that great, fully functional, with full APIs, full web services that's already built and working and hundreds and thousands of organizations already using? Why don't we make that and make it CDS? Make this back end of Microsoft Dynamics CRM CDS. And that's where what we would, Steve and I would call CDS 2.0, but what Microsoft calls the Power Platform, or the CDS of the Power Platform, and we'll talk more about that. So CDS then became literally the original version, which is completely custom, new common data services application, has become the back end of Microsoft Dynamics CRM, with its database, with all its kind of APIs and web services, and everything on top of that was sitting on top of Power BI is now sitting on top of this CDS, which is the PowerApps, Power BI, and Microsoft Flow. And the combination of all of this, all sitting on Azure, became the Power Platform. So again, to kind of repeat that, so we've got the backend, the old, what we would call the XRM of Microsoft CRM, with all its web services and web APIs and everything else, with PowerApps, Power BI, and Microsoft Flow sitting natively on top of that, all of them sitting natively on Microsoft Azure, has become the new Power Platform. That's the way I put it. I don't know about you, Steve. How would you put it? I'm sure you can put it in a different way, or probably a better way as well.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. It's interesting how where we ended up, is a path that Microsoft could have taken from the jump. Instead, they went a different direction until somebody somewhere said, "Hey, why aren't we just going this way?" And I can imagine some forehead slapping going on that, because it's just so obvious that the XRM platform was already, a power platform sitting there, and. You have different teams inside of Microsoft running different programs, and they're not, right hand's not always talking to the left hand like you'd hope it, but that's got a lot better under James Phillips in particularly, and I think that's part of why we're seeing stuff get tighter and crisper now in recent years than we saw in the past. Is there's a lot better coordination going on, and CDS 1.0 was started before James took over.
I agree, and I would, and we both, none of us works for Microsoft, and have no interest to say things are good if they're not. But I do agree that things have improved massively, and the teams are working closely in the past couple of years. And I think it goes back to James' leadership and also his whole team, to be fair. And on this point, I think it was, as you said, it was really obvious that you've got the XRM platform. Has already got everything, and not only that, it's already being used by thousands of organizations. It's pretty well established, tested, and used in live environments throughout the world. Why go and try to rebuild it somewhere else with CDS? So that then became the Microsoft Power Platform, and now, what we're going to do with Dynamics 365, what Microsoft thought is, so now Dynamics 365 is just become an app. So the backend of Dynamics 365, XRM, has become part of the Power Platform, has become the CDS of the Power Platform. But the Dynamics 365 itself, the sales, the marketing, the customer service, the field services, all the apps that we talked about, they become an app that is sitting on top of the Power Platform. So sales is now an app that sits on top of the Microsoft Power Platform. Obviously, it's a first-party app because it's built by Microsoft, so it's a first-party. While our app, for example, Steve's and I, Steve has Rapid Start and a few other apps. We have iProperty Cloud. We sit as a third-party app, still native, but third-party app on the Microsoft Power Platform, or what we would call a standalone app. Where you can go and build a standalone app that has nothing to do with Dynamics, build on PowerApps, for example, or Power BI or Microsoft Flow. But the Dynamics itself, then, all the different parts of Dynamics, all the sales, the marketing, the customer service, and so on, they've become apps that sit on top of Microsoft Power Platform. They're native, they're first party, and now we can go and divide the teams into the team that is just looking after 365 sales, for example, or team that is just looking after sales artificial intelligence, or another team that is looking after the mixed reality that's coming up, and so on. So the advantage, I think, in my view, again, I'm not talking on behalf of Microsoft in any way, but the advantage here is that you've got very focused teams that are only focusing on the functionality and the usability and the adoption of their apps, let's say the sales app, the AI apps, or any of the many AI apps that we have now, as opposed to the platform team who are very focused on the robustness and reliability of the platform, the extensibility of the platform, and the upgrade and continuous enhancements and improvements of the platform. And now you can go and build an app on top of the Microsoft Power Platform in two different ways, which is the subject of a next slide that I'm going to come to. But I'll stop there, and I'll just very quickly allow you, Steve, if you don't mind, just to talk a little bit about the Power Apps, the Microsoft Flow, and the Power BI within the Power Platform, and how you think these are powerful, how do you think these can be used, and the impacts of using them.
Yeah, sure. I think it's interesting, this XRM platform, which sat on a database that was underneath all of the original Dynamics, went through a little evolution first, where that whole thing first moved to Azure. And that happened, I think that was the V9 upgrade when it moved over to Azure. Yeah. And there was then there was that continuous effort of separating the first-party workloads like sales, service, customer service, field service, et cetera, separating both from each other as well as from that underlying platform. And really what was left underneath was the Azure database and the XRM development platform sitting on top of it. And that's how Power Platform kind of got its start. And I think a lot of the original thinking was that was still going to be, Dynamics. But once you strip off the specific workloads and you really look at what's left, you got a pretty powerful, this common data service is a pretty powerful thing for doing lots of different things. So we're already seeing, a spread much broader than just Dynamics and pure business applications. And that's really where we got to this Power Platform now. When you look at Power BI, which folks are probably familiar with, it took over the leading business BI application, Tableau, in the marketplace not too long ago. It's the number one business intelligence application right now, and that is part of the Power Platform, and that can read and write data into CDS, that common data service that we have. Microsoft Flow, which is similar to some of the other if this then that or Zapier type tools that have been around for years, but this is Microsoft's version that talks natively to all their own applications, and that also can talk back and forth to CDS. So when you think about Flow, what that really opened up, that gave them this little gateway into everything. I mean, that's where through Flow we can do things like we can pull data from Salesforce into CRM if we want to. We got 250 different
connections, right? 230 connections.
250 at the latest count. So they're continuing to add.
It's growing.
And that's all kinds of services out there. Salesforce and tons of services people are using every day, and that just allows you on one side to connect to any of those services, and on the other side to connect to any other of those services. And some of those services would include, for example, Dynamics 365 and CDS, so you can push and pull data back and forth through Flow, which I like to tell people looking at the Power Platform, it's probably the first place to start is with Flow, because it's really citizen developer capable, citizen developer friendly. And then the third part of that platform is what we're calling PowerApps. And when you're wondering what PowerApps is, well, Dynamics 365 Enterprise Sales is a big old Power App. Those are what we would call the first party. So those were built by Microsoft, sales, service, field service, and they're continuing to build more. Marketing is a first party Power App. And third parties like yourself and us and others are able to build, first class applications at the same level of those apps on the platform, and those are also called Power Apps. So those three pieces together are frankly have repositioned Microsoft completely for the future, and it's a pretty exciting time. So anybody that's I mean, go look up Power Platform. Don't worry about looking up Dynamics 365 for now. That's just a piece that runs on the Power Platform. If you really want to see what's going on, go chase down Power Platform, because that's the real story.
Right. Okay. So just to recap before I kind of go on to my next point. So what we said is we've got the Power Platform now, which is made up of CDS, or what Steve and I would call CDS 2.0, which in fact is XRM of Microsoft Dynamics CRM. And then on top of that, we've got the PowerApps, Power BI, Microsoft Flow. And then on top of that, or in parallel to that, if you like, we've got the Dynamics 365 apps, which we talked about earlier. They all sit as first-party apps sitting on the Power Platform. So now the question, how would I build an app? If I want to build an app now, I'm coming to Microsoft, I want to build my next app. How do I build it? And what's the difference between Dynamics app, Power App? So just to simplify it, the way I would put it is that everything is a Power App, whether it's built on what we used to call Microsoft Dynamics CRM, and I wrote the word CRM here specifically just to kind of make it closer to those who've been doing Dynamics CRM for many years. Whether you build it on top of the Microsoft Dynamics CRM or you build it on top of the canvas, the blank canvas, it is a Power App. And then if you build it on Microsoft Dynamics, so let's say you're using the Unified Client Interface, which, by the way, everyone should be using Unified Client Interface. Parity has almost been achieved. You are building it on a model, right? Because you're building on top of Dynamics. If you go and configure a form in Dynamics CRM, you're just dragging and dropping fields onto a form which is ready formatted for you. You've got some capabilities of changing how the form look and feel in terms of how many columns, but you can't change massively the form. But on the plus side, you can build up a form in seconds, literally, or minutes. So you're building on top of a model. So it's a very rapid development approach. And that's one of the kind of key advantages of Dynamics CRM over the years, is that you can build an application very rapidly. And I always had this opinion that organizations who go through a 12 months, 24 months dynamic project of building a Dynamic CRM application are actually, didn't get it right, because they should be looking at going live as quickly as possible with the minimum viable product, and then as soon as they do that, they start enhancing and improving the solution in an agile way, because Dynamics CRM lends itself to be a rapid development platform. So what I'm saying here is you can build it on the Dynamics CRM platform, or what we used to call Dynamics CRM, on the model, which is what we call the model driven here on the left hand side of my screen, and build it on the Unified Client Interface. You can still build it on the old web client, but that's almost legacy now. You shouldn't be looking at that, but I think you should be building it on the model-driven UCI interface. Or you can go and build it on a completely blank canvas, which is what we call which we used to be calling the PowerApps. So the blank canvas is the Canvas apps, and if you go now into the Power Platform Admin Center, the admin portal, you will see that if you create an application on top of Dynamics, it's called a model-driven app. So a UCI app is called a model-driven app. If you build an application using the Canvas app, it will be actually called Canvas app. So it's very clearly defined. This is a Canvas app. This is a model-driven app. So for the future, I've used all the previous terms because I know people are confused, and they are rightly so confused. I've used all the previous words so people understand what I'm talking about. But for the future, you have two types of Power Apps: model-driven and Canvas apps. Model-driven is your typical Dynamics-based, UCI-based application, or Canvas app, which is your typical blank canvas application, which you can build from scratch. There are pros and cons for both of them. There are advantages and disadvantages for both of them. There are good reasons to use either of them. I don't think one of them is perfect and the other one is not perfect. I think they're both very good, and I think they both are very important. And I can see organizations using one or both of them at the same time. So, for example, Canvas apps, you have the ability to build a pixel-perfect app. You can build an app that that's got your logo on, it's got your buttons, it's got everything you want in the location you want it to be. I had a customer who really liked to have their apps to look exactly how they want to brand their internal systems, or brand their their brochures, brand everything. They want the app to look like a brochure. You can't do that really with a model-driven app. because you've got limitations on how much you can customize the look and feel. But with a Canvas app, you can do that exactly as they want it. They can literally give you a Photoshop image, and you can go and build it in Canvas app. The disadvantage of that is, in my view, it takes longer to make that pixel perfect application with the look and feel that you want. It will take longer for you to build it because you're building every single component from scratch. Every single control is being added from scratch, formatted, colors added to it. And I'm talking from a kind of hand and fire experience, because we're currently building a new module to our iProperty Cloud application, and we're building this module as a Power Platform module. So it sits on a Power Platform. It only uses the contact entity, for example. However, we want to build an interface for it. Should we use the model-driven or the Canvas app? And we ended up building it twice, one model-driven and one Canvas app, for other business reasons, which I'm not going to go through. But because of that experience, we're building the same application in two different interfaces. The Canvas app is taking us longer, but it's pixel perfect. It's exactly how we want it to be. The model-driven one was built in few hours because it's based on a model. We can drag and drop, build up the forms, put up a logo on the top left, change a couple of icons of our entities, and off you go. So the interface in model-driven was built very quickly, but not pixel perfect, or not exactly how we want it to be. The Canvas app is built over a longer period, but it's pixel perfect and exactly how we want it to be. I hope I didn't take too much time explaining this, but I genuinely have met a lot of people who are confused between the two. Steve, do you want to add something, please?
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly, I think, the most confusing thing that we're seeing out there. PowerApps, when the name first launched, it was only Canvas. And they hadn't gotten to the model-driven stage yet. So PowerApps had a life as Canvas only, just called PowerApps. And when they introduced the model-driven capability to PowerApps and just called it another kind of Power App, I think a lot of people kind of got slung off the back of the bus on that hard turn. And then now we're reaching a point where you can, of course, embed a Canvas app into your model-driven app. So people are getting really confused again about what does all that mean. I mean, I would just look at them as different interfaces. You're working on the same set of data. You can surface that data in a model-driven app, which is what you're probably familiar with Dynamics. Might require a little more knowledge of how Dynamics works to make a model-driven app do what you would want it to do. Whereas Canvas Apps is really targeted, I think, even more so to that citizen developer. It has a kind of a PowerPoint style interface, uses expressions similar to Excel. So folks that are comfortable with PowerPoint or Excel could actually put something together. I think if you don't have any design sense, you can make something pretty ugly with Canvas apps. Whereas in model-driven, you really you don't have a lot of influence over the look and feel of the UI. So I've seen some really nice looking Power Apps, and I've seen some pretty ugly Canvas Power Apps. So
Yeah.
suddenly design sense comes into play. You can't really make a terrible color combination in model driven. You wouldn't have that ability. Yeah. But in Canvas, you can certainly make an ugly app.
Yeah, and you can make as you said, a perfect app as well. You've got the teams to do it because I think it's and as I said, from personal experiences, what as we're building our application, we literally have our kind of UX and graphic designer working on the look and feel of the app just to make it look as an enterprise grade application, which we can achieve very easily with the model driven. But at the same time, we can put a button wherever we want to put a button in. But then there is also the beauty of what I would like to use for the rest of my life would be the embedding of Canvas apps inside a model-driven app. So hopefully everyone has understood what we said so far, but just to add a little bit more confusion, that you can take now a Canvas app, you can go and build a Canvas app, think of it as a form or a small app or a small kind of subset, a calculator. Let's say I want to embed a calculator inside Dynamics CRM. I can go and build it in a Power App, in a Canvas app, and then I can go and embed it inside my model-driven form, inside my contact form, or inside my opportunity form, or whatever form I have in model-driven. So not only you can go and build model-driven apps, and you can go and build a Canvas app that sits inside a model-driven app. So, I think it's a great advantage because you're getting the best of both worlds. Things, I had customers over the years telling me, "Oh, can I have a form here where, let's say, I want to add a contact or all contacts with an organization, or all contacts and organizations within a bigger entity, whatever. Can I have that all on one screen?" I was like, "No, you can't. It's just, unless we do a web resource or something. But now I can actually go and build a Power App, which is connected to the database, which is embedded inside my form. And again, subject to kind of good design taste, I can make it blend in within the rest of the model-driven app to look exactly how the rest of the model-driven app looks. And it has a very rich functionality because I can design this interface the way I want it to be. So
yeah, I think you're also going to be seeing, as the PowerApps component framework rolls out, which is, we'll add another little layer onto this, but the PowerApps component framework is the ability for people to build custom controls and think of things like, well, for example, just looking at your screen there on the right, there's a map view. That could be a custom built component, sliders and other UI elements that can either be built by yourself, saved and reused across apps. So, every time you build an app, you don't have to start from scratch every time. You can kind of pull from a library. And then there's also going to be a growing ecosystem of ISVs and other developers and open source controls and components that you'd then be able to pull into that reusable library. And those components could also be used on the model-driven. So looking over on the model-driven picture there, we have that little graph there. That could be a component, and the same components could be shared across both those. So as Mohamed says, you start from a blank screen, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to build every single element yourself anymore. There'll be a growing library. You could just kind of pick and choose, and if you did make something unique of your own, you can reuse it. So it's going to be pretty fast development.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the PowerApps components framework, as it's now called, PowerApps control framework, or PCF for short, as it used to be called. I think it's a fairly powerful thing, and I think it's powerful for both, as you mentioned, but specifically for Dynamics. We had photo gallery, we had maps, we had lots of web resources which we embed inside our iProperty Cloud application. Now we can embed it as a PCF control instead, which is a great feature, and we can just literally whack this PCF control wherever we want it to be. So it's a great feature. But also having the ability to embed Canvas apps in model-driven apps also adds a lot of capabilities for us. And specifically because I can have a Canvas app that looks at SharePoint, or God forbid you use Salesforce or something like that, which is a wrong decision. But if you do, then you might want to put in a Power App that looks at your Salesforce inside your Dynamics app. Why would anyone do this? But hey, you could if you want to. So there are loads and loads of capabilities and features now. It's really up to people's imaginations. And I think, with all the brain powers in the Microsoft Dynamics community, I think, or the Microsoft Power Platform community, as we now should be calling it, I think there's a lot of innovative stuff that can be done. And I know, some of our friends and colleagues, MVPs, are building lots of interesting Power Apps all over the time. There are many games being built on Canvas apps, for example, which is really interesting and really powerful stuff. To show the power and capability of these applications. So we're 15 minutes left. What I thought, Steve, would be maybe a good time to stop here. And I've only got one more slide, which is literally just a summary of what we discussed. So I thought maybe it's a good time to stop here and start maybe taking questions from our audience. You can ask your questions either by chat or by just unmuting yourself and and asking the questions. I can see that there is some chat that was ongoing, and Steve, thank you, very helpful for answering some of these. But yeah, I think it'll be great if you, some of you, those who have questions, if you can just maybe unmute yourself and ask your question, and we'll try to answer them over the next 5 to 10 minutes. Anyone has any kind of urgent question, anything that you can think of, anything that we were not clear about in our presentation?
Well, we're waiting for people to get brave. On this slide that we're looking at, we want to make sure everybody understands that, just a click away from either of these directions is that those connectors. So when you're building your Canvas app, for example, not only are you building it on CDS and using the same CDS as your CRM if that's what you want to do, or you could have your separate one if you wanted to. You can also, through connectors, reach out to 250 other and a growing list of other applications that are out there to be able to consume data and mash it up against other data in your Canvas app. It's really going to be pretty exciting.
Right, so questions have started to come in. So Steve, first question we have, can you use a Canvas app to bring in data and views from external legacy systems?
So, it's not natively, but again, if you look at that connectors, one of those connectors that is out there is I'm lost in the name. It's kind of a generic connector where you can build your own connection in anything. Obviously need to be able to get to your system, and some systems out there you can't get to, but as long as you can connect to that system through a connector, you can pull data into PowerApps, sure.
Yeah, and I think, especially if your question specifically is around an on-premise system, so obviously PowerApps is in the cloud. It can connect to many cloud applications, but can it connect to an on-premise application? Yes, it can. I haven't seen it done yet, but I'm sure it has been done, but I haven't personally seen it done yet. But I believe you can dip inside your on-premise data center, or wherever your legacy system, external legacy system or legacy system is, as long as you've got the right security set up so that you block any obviously unexpected applications or individuals or hackers or whatever to access your application. If there is a way where you have some kind of dip Power App inside your application, read from it, that's one way. Another way, which could answer your question, is, and we are certainly doing some of that with one of our customers, is that you can actually push some of your legacy application data into a Microsoft Azure SQL database, and then your Power App can read directly from there. So you don't have to be going straight into the legacy application. You can have some kind of either a staging database as a Microsoft Azure SQL database, or you can have a middleware that you kind of connect using it. So there are many ways of doing this. Right, going on to the next question.
Thank you very much for that. That was very helpful.
Oh, thank you.
It's funny, you don't sometimes realize until you get to the questions in the Q&A who your audience was.
Sorry.
And now you're kind of seeing for some of the questions. You've obviously got some developer type folks, or certainly some tech savvy folks. You could tell based on the questions. So we should probably start these things with Q&A so we know who we're talking to before we go through before we go through an hour of talking about stuff.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know about you, Steve, but if there's lots of questions that people would like to have a follow-on kind of discussion in a couple of weeks' time, I'm more than happy to do that. But let's go and answer the next question, so I don't want people to kind of lose interest. So build a Power App with payment gateway. I can't see why not.
Knock yourself out.
Sorry?
Yep, knock yourself out. If you have the technical ability to figure out the payment gateway side, you could certainly build a Power App. I think there's even some payment gateway connectors that, if you want to use one of the existing payment gateways out there, is a pretty straight shot to build a payment gateway. We're seeing people doing that now, both on Model and Canvas, where they've got that mobile application where they can collect payments and go straight into. We might used to have said it goes straight into CRM, but now we're thinking, well, it goes straight into the common data service, which of course CRM is using as well. So
yeah, absolutely. So there's so many ways you can do that. You can, you can call the API for the payment gateway. You can embed some of this inside your application. There's so many different ways of doing it, but yes, definitely the answer is yes, you can. A very good question from Angus about the. So we've been talking about CRM, and Steve and I we're a bit biased because we're front office type of application people. But what about the F&O or the AX backend ERP systems? Not just F&O and Business Central and so on. What's the story behind it, and how does it work? Or how does it fit into the Power Platform story?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it fits in not as smoothly, and the path is early for both AX and Business Central. Right now, both of those applications have Microsoft has built integration tools that will push data. AX in particular has a dual write that can be activated, so it's saving data in the AX database, but it's dual writing that data into CDS. And when I say CDS, just think about whatever's under whatever any of these apps you're using, whether it's Dynamics or model driven or Canvas or Forms Pro. Microsoft's new Forms Pro runs on top of CDS. Anything that gets into CDS you can use from any of those things. And AX right now does this dual write, so it'll write into its own database as well as simultaneously writing into the CDS. So I wouldn't say the connection for AX or Business Central is as direct as it is to CRM, because remember, this CRM had a head start. They ended up lifting the database under CRM and saying, "Oh, that's going to be CDS." So, but they're definitely working towards that with all of them. But being able to talk between Dynamics and Business Central or F&O via CDS, you can absolutely do that today.
Absolutely, and I would probably jump into a question from Nirmal, which kind of ties into what you were saying earlier, Steve, and what we're saying is that if I'm using Dynamics 365 CRM online version 9, do I need to move into CDS? No, you don't. You are already on CDS. You are already on the Power Platform. If you are on Dynamics CRM Cloud or Dynamics 365 Cloud, you're using any of the apps, sales, customer service, anything, you are already on CDS. So you don't actually need to do anything. Your data is already in CDS, because CDS, as we said earlier, is XRM, is what we used to call XRM, or the back end of Dynamics CRM. All you need to do then is go and build additional apps. Just go and build more Canvas apps, build more UCI apps, all connecting to the same app, to the same CDS backend. So the answer is you are already on CDS. You don't need to do anything if you are on Dynamics in the cloud.
I see some questions around some connectors, and just so people know, you can go to flow.microsoft.com and look at the list of connectors. The Flow connectors that are listed, that's just the fastest way to get to the list of connectors, but all of those connectors are available in your Canvas app, in your model-driven app, throughout PowerApps. And somebody was asking about specifically which payment gateway, if there's one up there that works for you, and like I say, there's 250 of them out on that website, connectors that is, they're not all payment gateways. You can certainly utilize one of those, which will save you some time. Or I know there's the ability to build a custom connector if you've got the technical chops to do that, which isn't tremendously complex, but it does require some development skills.
And then we have the question that we're really kind of worried that anyone would ask, but it's the licensing question, which will probably need a few more hours to cover. But if we were to kind of answer the question from Atisam very kind of recently, the last question, are there any license requirements to use CDS based? So I'll try to be brief around this, but as I said, it's a very complicated. It's not complicated, but I mean, depends on many different things, and there are guides and very detailed breakdown. But to make it simple, if you are just using CDS as in XRM and you're building a Canvas app or a model-driven app, there's only, let's say, only using the contact entity. If it is, there is a new type of licenses called the Power Platform licenses, which is the P2 license. The P2 license is different from the Dynamics 365 license. P2 license doesn't give you access to Dynamics 365 first-party apps, but gives you access to build and run apps, whether they're Canvas or model-driven, on top of CDS. And that's specifically P2 licenses. They are slightly cheaper than the Dynamics 365 apps. But if you have a Dynamics 365 app license, so you've got customer service license or the customer engagement license, which gives you all Dynamics 365, the majority of Dynamics 365 apps, then you automatically have access to CDS. And then there is another type of license called P1, which, Steve, I think that's probably I'm sure you're a lot more familiar with that P1 versus P2 based on the recent discussions we had with the product team. So do you want to cover maybe a bit more on the P1 and P2?
Yeah, we've been kind of avoiding the P1. We haven't found it to provide enough capability to do what kind of the minimum of what people would expect to be able to do on PowerApps. And as you said, all of the enterprise first-party applications come with this capability, but they did release that platform license, the P2 license, last year for people that I want to be able to build my own custom apps for my business and or my customers, but I don't necessarily want to have to spend the money on Microsoft's first-party applications. My requirements are unique to me. They don't have anything to do with what they may be providing in those. So you can buy that P2 license and just get a CDS and start building whatever you want.
Absolutely, yeah. So as you said, I would probably avoid the P1 because we could end up with a team member situation, which I personally avoided, and we as a business we avoided as much as we can throughout our our engagement with customers. The P2 license, which is still cheaper than I think it's cheaper than the Dynamics 365 app license. It gives you full control on CDS. You can still build a model-driven app, so you can still build a UCI app. You can build a Canvas app. You can build as many apps as you want with a P2 license and run them with a P2 license. But the restriction would go into around not using, and am I right to say not using or not trying to rebuild any of the entities in the D365 first-party apps. But to be honest, I think we're probably running out of time, so I wouldn't even want to go down that rabbit hole because it might get too confusing. But hopefully that answers the question at a high level, that P2 is a different license that's specific for CDS or for Power Platform, to be specific. Because remember, Power Platform is a lot more than just CDS. It has the ability to build Canvas apps as well as building Power BI and Microsoft Flow. Right. I'm just going to summarize in less than a minute what we've been saying throughout this session, especially for those who joined in the last few minutes and might have missed some of our discussion. So CDS 2.0, or as we call it internally between some of our MVP friends and colleagues, this is basically a replatforming of the Dynamics CRM backend, which used to be called XRM, which includes the data layer, the security layer, the web services, the APIs. All of that has been encompassed inside CDS. And then on top of that, you've got the PowerApps, Power BI, and Microsoft Flow. We also have and that's what we said, the core original Dynamics 365 platform. We also said that we've got the Dynamics 365 modules or apps, which is sales, marketing, AI for sales, or sales AI, or customer service AI, and so on. These are now called first-party apps that sit on top of the Power Platform natively. We said that the Power Platform includes PowerApps, Power BI, and Dynamics 365. Third-party apps is where you go and build your own apps, or you can build your own standalone apps straight on CDS, or with or without Dynamics 365. We mentioned that for kind of a rapid development, you would probably still want to continue to use the Dynamics 365 apps because you've basically got hundreds and thousands of functionality in the first-party apps. And with that, we're right on time. And I really thank you very much, Steve, for coming and joining me into this discussion. It was very valuable to have your kind of insights into this. And thank you, everyone on the call, everyone who came in. I really appreciate your coming into this call. We have recorded the call, so it will be available for you to kind of download or listen to it online. And yeah, thanks again for coming. Hopefully that was somehow interesting or helpful to you. And yeah, thanks, Edgar. And we'll speak to you again. If you follow me or follow Steve over the next few days, we'll probably be coming up with a bit more ideas and webinars over the next few days. Here are my contact details. If anyone wants to get in touch, please feel free to. And with that, I'll end up the call. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mohammed. I'll be seeing you soon.
Yeah, I'll speak to you later. Thank you. Thanks very much.